So we're now going to turn our attention to the next piece of the puzzle in the Java Executor framework, and that is the Java Executor Service. And this service, as we'll see in a moment, provides a number of very powerful features that go above and beyond what you get with the Java Executor interface. So the Executor Service interface and the implementations of that interface will be more powerful than what we had seen before with the Java Executor interface. So first and foremost, the Java Executor Service interface extends Executor. So you get the one and only execute method that's defined by Executor. Although in practice, you typically do more with the Executor Service than just execute runnables. And that's the main focus of what we're going to be talking about over the course of these upcoming lessons. As you can see, there's a lot more methods in the Java Executor Service interface compared to Java Executor. Some of the methods in the Executor Service interface can be used to submit one or more tasks and return something called a future for these tasks. And we'll talk quite a bit more later about what a future is, but for the time being, you can think of a future as essentially a proxy to the result of a computation that runs concurrently and or asynchronously in the background. There's also a number of methods that are part of the Executor Service that make it possible to manage the life cycle for tasks that are submitted for execution, as well as to manage the life cycle of the Executor Service itself. So there's various things you can do to manage the Executor Service, to take its implementation down, for example, and you can do that in a couple different ways, as we'll see. And then you can also, of course, have the side effect of affecting the tasks that are running or are queued to be run at some point in the future. So basically, you can use these various management APIs in order to be able to interrupt tasks that are running either gracefully or a bit more abruptly to some extent. And we'll talk about that as well. So just a quick recap of what a task is. We've talked about what tasks are before. A task is a computation that ideally does not depend on the result or the side effects of other tasks. So you'd like it to be as independent of other tasks as possible. And of course, the analogy I always like to use there is doing your laundry, where you don't have to worry about dependencies between different loads of clothes. There are 4 phases in the life cycle of a task. For those of you who are familiar with Buddhism or certain branches of Hinduism are probably familiar with the concept of samsara. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but it's about sort of life cycles and rebirth and death and then so on. And so tasks are very much the same way. They have a life cycle that's associated with them. When a task is first created, it is going to come into existence, and we'll talk about how you do that in just a moment. Once it's been created, then it can be submitted, and that is typically where it's queued or arranged to be executed by some thread in a pool of threads that's managed by the Executor Service. At some point, the task will start to run in a worker thread, and that's when its hook method is called back, typically the call hook method, or could be the run hook method if you submit it versus execute it. And then at some point, the task will be finished, and it will either complete successfully, in which case there could be a result if you submit it, or perhaps it failed, and you'll learn that through some kind of exception. And we'll talk about how all that information is conveyed as we go through the examples. So that's the end of the quick overview of the Java Executor Service interface. Keep in mind that it builds upon the Executor interface, which is very simple, and adds many more methods that manage how you submit tasks to be executed or run in a pool of threads that backs the Executor Service interface, and also provides various methods to manage the life cycle of an Executor Service instance, as well as the tasks that are running within it. And we'll take a much more detailed look at all this other stuff in just a moment.